What is up, beautiful souls? I want to take a minute today. I want to tell you my story. A lot of you may know my story, but many of you, and when I say my story, I want to tell you a part of my story. It's not the full story, but it's an important part to the story. And I'll be honest, and why it's so significant, this has hit me, and I so pray that my story, this part of a story, can help anybody else that may be in a very dark place right now. Or even if you've been through the dark place and you have made it to the other side, and maybe you can share your story with the rest of us. Are you able to follow me yet? I want to welcome you. I'm Crystal. And in short, here at Crystal Clear, I am been called to be a spiritual mentor. What does that mean? It simply means I want to have one-on-one conversations with my brother and sister that reminds each of us, just as a reminder. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but at a soul level, you came here for something more. And when we get caught up in the 3D chaos, we forget that this matrix is a part of the design. Now, the story I want to tell you, some may or may not know. So I want to welcome you if you are on Spotify or Apple. Today, this recording is my intention to be the first thing that goes up. I want to broaden my reach. I want to reach out to more brothers and sisters out there. And at the end of the day, guys, these are the discussions that I want to be my legacy, the ripple that I leave when my job here is done. And that is ever expanding. And many of you guys have been here from the very beginning, has seen the evolution of my own journey. And I want to say thank you. And if you're new, because I am branching out today, when this goes up on Apple and Spotify, I welcome you to be a part of this journey. Now, if I've kept your interest, or if you're patient enough and have gotten through this, I think I'm going to name this episode, this video, if you will, Never Lost, Just in Design. Now, I've had many woohoo experiences. I've had many human experiences. I've walked the line of what people would consider sane. And while it's been very fortunate, it's not all pretty, right? But I remember one time, and this is why I think this story is so significant, a part of my story, because I don't talk about this part often, or probably rarely, or ever. This may be the first time I actually speak about it today. I went through my own dark night of the soul, and it was only after a tumultuous, horrific relationship with the covert sociopathic narcissist, who ends up being, just like to spoil the whole story, ends up being my biggest blessing. And I'm not saying it was easy, but I want to rewind beyond that. Because I remember when I was in that relationship and the things that had transpired up to that moment, I couldn't comprehend. I couldn't put my mind around what was happening. I genuinely thought, in a weird way, maybe it was the worst curse that God could ever put on me. It was like a cruel joke. And I searched for videos, for gurus, for anybody that could understand what the hell could be happening to me and help me get a grip. And I never found a video. I never once found a video that understood or spoke directly to what I was going through. Maybe it was designed that way. Maybe it was, I believe everything is orchestrated. Everything is divinely paving our way, if you will, to where we're meant to be. We have these heart desires, yearnings that act as a compass, passion that acts as the drive. And just to begin, my story, like so many, was a little girl that was seeking to be loved, to be accepted, to fit the society norm, to gain success and be placed amongst that category of whatever society deems as successful or whatever. The dogma: go to school, get your degree, get a career, climb the ladder, get your retirement right before you die, enjoy what you can. I too have been there. I've done that. But I want to even fast forward a little bit further. So at some point in my life, I always knew my heart was with the collective. My heart has been with you guys, my brother and sister. And I didn't know, I didn't have the words to articulate it back then. And of course, I would go through my own self-discoveries, if you would. I think early on, I wouldn't say I was atheist, but I was definitely agnostic. I knew that something had to create even that to the Big Bang, right? And still to this day, it blows my mind when I think about who, like the divine, and how the divine was created. And I can go down these spirals, and that's a philosophy, and those are some awesome debates. Spiritual talk, we can talk about another day. I'm going to promise I'm going to do my best to stay on topic. I actually recorded this once already. It's halfway edited. It's pretty, I think it's pretty good. Maybe I'll post it one day. I think I was trying too hard. And guys, I want to come back to my roots. I've had this epiphany, come back to my roots for you guys, to be as authentic and real and vulnerable as possible. And I'll tell you what, when we're vulnerable, that is our biggest gift we can give to another. And being transparent and raw, we share with another that they're not alone in their journey. And that being said, as I go down this memory lane, if you will, and I thank you for allowing me to do it, while my story may be very unique and different from yours, there's one thing that we do share in this human journey. That is the language of energy. My guides, I've mentored people, and I have been around, I've heard amazing stories, both horrific and blissful, right? And there's times that I get tripped up in the 3D and think, God, how can I help? Like that, spirit, I'm not designed for this. Or even though my heart's out there, and spirit will humbly remind me that a man that's facing a gun at head point is just as petrified as a child that's scared of the boogeyman underneath the bed. I'm telling you this because only humans will label something as more relevant or irrelevant than the other. But the truth is, while the stories are very different, the experience, the energy frequency, the true fear of this might be my last breath coexists at the same time, different situations. So when I'm telling you my story, guys, today, I don't expect you to be like, oh, I haven't, or place my story higher or lower in any kind of ranks. I want you to just tap into your soul, where you're at, your higher self, Holy Ghost, and listen to that reminder, your spirit guides that are around you, that there's so much more to everything that's happening. So now I'm about 10 minutes in. Let me tell you the story that I never really spoke about, and the divine guidance and how it led out, and how it really shaped and even left me very scared, lost. I felt alone, only because in the beginning of how my quote-unquote awakening began, but unbeknownst to me, was only just the beginning. However, I thought while I was living it was everything. So for me, going back, right, agnostic, I wasn't very ever religious. Especially if you spoke about spirituality, I tied that with religion, and it just was a turn off for me. But science was something I could relate to, right? It's something that we can understand or else have reasoning behind. And that started really with the law of attraction. If you're not familiar with the law of attraction, I definitely recommend you look it up. I heard somebody the other day, it was just so profound. I got to throw it out there. Law of attraction is nothing more than the energy of our aura around us. It's what we're attracting on a regular basis. But that is based on the frequency of our aura. I thought that was pretty profound. A little off topic, but maybe you guys would think it is too. So as I go down the studies of law of attraction, I started going into groups, right? And in these groups, I ended up meeting a gentleman who I have no doubt was a soulmate. I think we have many soulmates in our life. They come in for seasons, lifetimes, or just a short reason, right? This one gentleman, we just lit up, and I'm like, oh, I think he's mine forever. This was well over a decade ago. He lived in Nebraska. I lived in Utah. And somehow we ended up meeting up. And yes, the connection, he was the one soul that I do remember something within me going, I've been looking for you. When I heard that, I thought, oh, wow, like this, he must be my forever. But he was definitely the one that would lead me to my spirituality, act as a guide in a way in all these divine synchronicities. At one point, we met up, and because I'm in Utah, he's in Nebraska, we met on the outskirts of Nebraska, a very small, whole, probably isn't even on the map, little town, right? And to try to find something to do, we got on Yelp and looked for entertainment. Just so happened there was a psychic that was in town. Could you believe that? I reflect back on, what are the odds of that? But we decide, what the hell? It'll be fun. Let's go check it out. Now, granted, my soulmate, this man at the time, he was spiritual. And he was more spiritual than I was and had more meditative insights. And I was still just playing with the laws of the universe. I was playing with the idea that if the moment we place our consciousness on an atom, we alter its course. Imagine if we place our attention with deliberate intention and what we could do to that atom, especially with that being all made of us. That was my world. However, I had gone down so far down the law of attraction that I almost came to, well, I really want, not necessarily the law of attraction, I want to say quantum mechanics, is that you can do so much studying of the science, but there's a wall. Even Einstein, the more you study, there's got to be more to it. There's got to be, that's where I was at. Long story short, we go to this psychic, and my boyfriend at the time goes first, and he's just wowed, right? Because he's had these meditative experiences. He's met his spirit guides in these meditations. Sorry, my son walked in. So where was I at? So my boyfriend at the time, I'll try to edit these the best I can. He had already had meditations. He had already met his spirit guides, and she came in and she just solidified everything he had experienced. And I think that's what's kind of cool about some of these psychics, true, good, pure psychics. They are just led to give you the solidification. What's the word I'm looking for? Give you that assurance, solidification, what you've already been told from your own spirit guides, but they give you that assurance that you're not so crazy. Anyway, fast forward. So I got out there and met some soulmates, again, some that support me, are watching me. I love you. Others that, one of my dear soul brothers I met at this seminar. And we're still dear friends to this day. And we've done so much growth. Everything was just divinely orchestrated. But at this seminar, guys, I never really understood the wounds that we carried, right? So these are just little synchronicities, the way spirit got the ball rolling, if you will. And I'm beginning to feel like crystal clear is starting to take off. I'm beginning to believe in my role. At this point, I'm kind of moving from motivational coaching to life coach, following those nudges and watching the world light up for you. Well, at the seminar, there's a guest speaker, beautiful mentor. Anyway, I call her my earth angel. She came out onto the stage and said some really profound things. And she even had her son there and was talking about how she's very open and she cussed, she was authentic, she was her real self, and she spoke to me in such a deep way. But she was talking about emotions and how we have these emotions for a reason, yet we suppress them. But they're nothing but messengers. They're there to direct us, to guide us. And this was so profound because I never listened. I never really listened to those emotions, if you will. I could go backwards a decade before when I was first introduced to law of attraction and became conscious of my thoughts, but I never listened to the emotions. What she said was so profound, guys. I ended up in my car and I was bawling. I was literally just crying because the emotions were arising so tenfold, if you will. And the old programming came in immediately. Why are you crying? Are you physically hurt? And it hit me. It was like, that's what she's talking about. I'm crying because there's a part of me that wants to be seen. There's a part of me that needs to be understood. There's something within me that is being processed. And my go-to is to suppress it. My go-to is pull my shit together and think straight. And then I have another moment of realization. These exact words, why are you crying? Are you physically hurt? Are things that I had repeated to my son. And the tears came that a 10 more fold. And then I remember these words are something that my father, bless his heart, had probably said to me. What is this called? Our generational curses are the trauma that's passed down from generation to generation until it becomes consciousness, until it becomes awakened. And I think this was the first time I am embodying this. I'm beginning to understand what all these terminologies meant. Well, I go home that evening, and this beautiful earth angel that was here at the guest of the seminar, Marcy, she had a small get-together out in Sandy, I think it was Sandy. These details are not necessarily as relevant as the story, but I felt like I had to go out there. I had to talk to her, because to me, I'm more concerned at this point now that I may have screwed up my son. I loved the relationship she had with her son. I wanted that relationship with my son. And I, above all else, wanted to undo the damage that I had done. I wanted him to be able to communicate with his emotions and understand these things that I'm beginning to understand. So I went out there, and I went alone. There had been some people there at the seminar that were scattered, but it was all the same weekend. I wasn't dearly close with anybody. But I had a moment, and I asked her some of the hardest questions and realizations that I may have ever had. I remember crying and begging for direction to this woman, telling her, I think I really fucked up. You said this profound message about our emotions being messengers, and I told my son to stuff it down, and these programmings have begun, and I just let loose. I was honest. And I'll be here's another honesty. At that point, guys, I was a people pleaser. I still cared what people thought about me. I cared about my appearance. I didn't want to come off as weak. But for some reason, maybe it was because I had this profound love, deeper than for myself, but for my child, that allocated me a moment of true vulnerability. And I had never been vulnerable like this before. Very open and transparent in front of a crowd. I didn't care. And I let it all go. And this was also another very profound moment for me, guys. This was a moment I found out what the power of vulnerability was. Because unbeknownst to me, as I am just zoned in on my concern of trying to make things right for my son, people around me were having these epiphanies, their own ahas of, I can relate. I may have done the same thing with my child. And they came to me afterwards. And so that was it. It was right. Oh my gosh. I didn't think I could affect anybody. I wasn't here to affect anybody. It wasn't intentional. But people could relate to the story. And so I would say that was a huge marker in recognizing how powerful vulnerability really is, and how many people actually may have had the same question, but was too scared of being transparent, being exposed, maybe being shamed on, or whatever. That's the whole idea about vulnerability, right? You could be rejected. People might laugh at you. But today, people supported me. And in that support, I found another dear soul brother, if you would. He too was working on his development of his own business as I was working on my development with Crystal Clear. We immediately began to network together, and he had another seminar, but this was in Arizona this time. He had asked if I would come. He said, if you pay for the ticket and your daily day things or whatever, I've got a room, we've got the tickets, it's for your product launch thing. It was to launch our businesses, if you would. And I felt it in my soul again. And this is the before story, guys, but I want, as we're going from that moment of Nebraska to even now, things are beginning to pick up speed. The acceleration to my spirituality, this awakening, this moment was gaining so much momentum, from this walking into that seminar to meeting this earth angel to being at a different little get together to all of a sudden finding out the power of vulnerability. And now I've got my new soul brother, unbeknownst to me, how significant he would play a role in my life, invite me out to Nebraska to launch Crystal Clear, which was nothing more at that point, life coaching, basically. And we get out there, and there were some really cool things I experienced. But again, everything is divinely synchronized. And I want to tell you this story as well. And I'm telling you these stories because maybe you can relate back on your life and how there are no coincidences. What are the odds of this happening? So we go to the seminar, we leave. We're done for the day or whatnot, and people are mingling this and that. Well, I forgot my favorite pair of sunglasses, and I could not leave them behind. So we turned back. So at this point, maybe 10-minute increment from 2, and we were going back 20 minutes later. And I ended up getting my glasses, and there's a woman there. And I've been doing interviews for Crystal Clear about people following their passion, their bliss. And so I'm doing a little interview with this woman, and her husband ends up coming up afterwards with this lady. And he's like, you guys will never guess who I found here and how old this woman is. We look at her, and she looks like her. She's in her late 20s, early 30s, vibrant, youthful, at her peak, not a wrinkle in sight. And just really, her energy is just vibrating, right? Not that I understood, again, exactly what all that entailed. But he's like, no, this woman is 60. And we're like, no way. There's like, so we're all in awe of this woman, right? Well, again, I don't know much about spirituality, but my soul brother that I went there with was very in tuned. So I mingle with other people on the side. He's mingling primarily with this one lady. So after I'm done, I mosey my way over there, sit down. They're talking big ideas, things that I like over my head. I didn't understand. So I waited politely until there was an opportunity that I could interject and be a part of the conversation. And at which point I don't remember what I said, but she looks at me. And this was maybe the second time a quote unquote human would look at me directly and communicate with not me, but to my soul. And I'll never forget. She looked at me and she said, wow, it's happening fast for you. And my body lit up. Again, my whole soul just lit up. And unbeknownst to me, I start bawling. Tears of joy are coming down my face, and I don't understand what's happening. I didn't know what she meant, but she was talking to my soul, and what she was really saying at the end of the day is, wow, your DNA upgrade is accelerating and is going at a profound speed. We were on the way back to the airport, and my brother, he got her phone number and was texting her. And I had thought about it because what she said were so profound, yet so simple. And I didn't understand it all. But I asked him, I said, hey, ask her. Because this woman reminded me, and I will always call her this. She was the oracle. She was the one oracle in real life time that I met. She reminded me of the oracle off the Matrix. So I said, ask her if she's an oracle. Because she's young, she's youthful, there's not a line, her energy's there, and she knew, just like she could talk, she could see through the human persona. And she laughed and she said, let Crystal know she's an empath. And she gave me some readings to go discover. Guys, I was so ignorant. I didn't understand. But I heard empath, and I had heard that I was an empath throughout my life. And I had always assumed and always took that kind of, I thought that was so weird. I have empathy. Don't we all have empathy? Little did I know, not everybody has empathy, let alone what the true definition of an empath meant. So what happens next? The speed odometer, if you will, starts catching even more speed as if I'm going down a hill, and just my brother asks me yet again, will you come to Hawaii? There's a spiritual retreat, and I think that you would really benefit from this. Again, I'm just following the law of attraction, if you will, the law of coincidences, and just seeing how my life is unraveling. Up before these experiences, I was in college pursuing an accounting degree, but now finally living the life I had always dreamed of. And again, I followed the nudge of my soul. Everything in my system, everything said, you need to be there. And at the time, it was the beginning of dating the covert sociopathic narcissistic, who I didn't know who that was at the time. But I ended up inviting him to come, which was significant because the line of events that came and how significant it felt that I needed, that led me to believe that we had this connection, which is another point to you guys, right? We have these experiences with people and they're not healthy for us. They're probably very toxic, but that's a part of the cognitive dissonance. That's that bonding that happens. And this was probably the first real bonding experience I had with this individual who was very unhealthy for me. But I put a high significance because he was there on this one trip in particular. I got there, I lit up. Hawaii is beautiful, guys. The energy is spiritual in its own sense. It's got its own energies. And we ended up on a sugarcane field, and we could hear the toads in the background, and I could hear the ocean nearby. I would wake up in the morning and go for my morning jogs. But up to this meeting, this seminar, well, this wasn't a seminar, excuse me, this was the ceremony. We were asked to eat clean and keep our bodies pure. And I was entering into a ceremony of ayahuasca. And guys, pure ignorance. I'm just telling you my story. I didn't know. I had no idea it was psychedelic. I had no idea what ayahuasca was. All I knew was that it was a tea. We had the most profound experiences. We got to actually beat the branches of it and become one with the tea and understand the process and the ancestry of it, if you will, and becoming really connected with grandmother and grandfather. Things that were very foreign to me, but I just honored it. I honored the journey and where I was going. And I would have my ayahuasca experience. And as many would say, your plant medicine is in fact like therapy, a decade's worth of therapy in one night. I'm not advertising, I'm not advocating, but I'm telling you this was my experience. And in that night, having, again, a new, very profound understanding that there really is everything. While we have free will, everything is so divinely orchestrated to a T that genuinely, I don't think any of us can really comprehend, pull our mind full circumference of how my action divinely interweaves in this beautiful tapestry of everything playing out exactly as it's supposed to. What happened after that trip, guys? So this is the story. This is the story before my story, if you will. I had began, my spiritual senses something happened that night. My empathy, not my empathy, but my empathness, my sensitivity ricocheted to an all-time hyper awareness sensitivity in that I could feel the energy around me. I would see the world through a different lens, if you will. And what was interesting, which is significant if you guys know anything about my story, is the lotus. I say the lotus is my flower, but not because I picked it, but it picked me. And right before I had gone into my own experience, I had seen the lotus in my mind's eye. But I didn't even know what that flower was really called. I had called over our sacred mother, shamans that were hosting it, if you would, and asked her. She came to hold me what it was, and I was able to spit out lotus, or local, I think was what I call it. I'm like, a local flower, but she picked up immediately. She knew what it was. And when I studied this flower, right, you can't bloom without the mud. I had felt like up to this point, I had lived my life in a muck and didn't understand and was people pleasing and and finally was hitting the pinnacle of my awakening. I thought this was the beginning of it all. I was experiencing ecstatic bliss, an all-time high, if you will. And it wasn't just with a plant medicine, but in every experience, from meeting an oracle to meeting an earth angel that would open my eyes to one of my first wounds, to different soulmates that were placed in my timeline, to my gifts being awakened. And I thought life couldn't get much better than this. I had experienced a consciousness, a high peak of pure joy and bliss, a nirvana, if you would, only to end up going home and eventually entering into a very serious relationship to my opposite, if you will, to a very toxic dynamic, to the narcissistic / empath, covert sociopath. The beginning of boiling the frog happened. The IV, if you will, of toxicity, the cancerous poison being entered into my veins, dealing with this, not even, and this is a story, guys. I'm trying to bring this all for circumference because this was a story before the story. And I know it's still evolving. But at that time, I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening, especially as a former motivational coach, in that nobody can stop you from becoming who you want to be. You're in control of your own thoughts. You're in control of your own destiny. And on top of it, I'm dealing with a covert who is very sympathetic and will give you the shirt off their back. And if you've never dealt with one, they are maybe is one of the most mind-boggling experiences, because you can't really pinpoint what's happening, but the energy is very real. It's a spiritual warfare, undoubtedly. And if you're in that spot, separation that really leads you to your liberation. And I thought even in the relationship with this toxic man was maybe my dark night, but this was all just the beginning. It was the beginning of the descent, if you will. But when I was in the relationship, this was the video I was trying to look for. I was trying to find somebody that could tell me, did I fall back asleep? Why am I falling into this deep depression? And I can't fight it for the life of me. And slowly, as the isolation begins, and they get in your head, and you believe it's your own ideas, and you just need to recoup. I separated myself from my tribe. I had started to sink into a depression, an apathy, a guilt, a shame. And I didn't understand. And I'm going to wrap this video up because this is just one part of the story. But what I want to say, nobody talks about, and maybe I want to hear from you. Do you have a story that you can relate to, where you thought you were at the peak of your awakening, that everything was absolutely divine and a beautiful orchestration, if you will, only to fall into a dark abyss and not understand what was happening. Not understand that really, in fact, what you had just felt. And if you experience this, right? If I was my younger version looking back and going, what the hell's going on? And maybe I didn't even know that I was in the toxic relationship at the time. All I knew is I was really depressed. I didn't know if I was falling back asleep. I didn't know if I was losing my grips on reality. And I didn't know if I would make it. This is the part I'm telling you, if you were in the state, hold tight. There was so much more to my story. What I was in wasn't my design. That black night, that experience was designing me with my spiritual gifts, an outcome that I couldn't even imagine at the time. So what I'm trying to say, as I pull this full circumference, liberation came through separation eventually at the end. If you're in a toxic relationship and you're in a trauma bond or the Stockholm Syndrome, this part of the story is a different section. But I just want to say that the realization of the true awakening, if you feel like you've had an awakening and you've all of a sudden gone back to an abyss, have you gone back to sleep? If you are facing your own depression after having a significant realization of an epiphany of an ecstatic bliss, and now you're in the depths, I want you to understand that your true awakening, you have only had a taste. It's in our dark moments that the apathy and the despair is paving the way to profound truths, ancient truths, but things that we may have forgotten in our avatar of experience of the 3D chaos. And in the darkness, as we begin to liberate ourselves, this is where the true awakening happens. So if you have been at a very high peak and now find yourself at a very bottomless pit, if you will, I would ask that you hold on. I ask you to begin to go deep and ask the questions of what situations, circumstances, or relationships have you where you are today. And while, yes, you are very much in control of your own mind and your own thoughts and your outcome, I want you to know if you are in a circumstance, situation, or relationship where you have the IV of a toxic dynamic in your veins, you cannot heal in a toxic environment. You must first liberate yourself. And even then, it's scary, especially if it's in a dynamic of such with a relationship, because it really is an addiction. And like any addiction, it takes time. It takes a willpower. It takes the ability to stay conscious and just make it through one. For me, some people say it's one day at a time. For me, it was always 1 second at a time. If I could just hold on for 1 second, surely there was another second. And those seconds do add up. That's a two-part story for another day. But do know that these ancient truths are making their way to you, whether you can see it or not. And as I reflect back on my past story, from the Lotus of thinking that was my true mud, I think Spirit was actually just giving me a heads up. Buckle up. You're about to bloom, but you can't bloom without the mud. And what I had thought was previously murky and yucky, I had no idea what was in store. And I think it was divinely orchestrated that way. I wouldn't change my story for anybody. I also wouldn't wish the pain upon anybody. It is, without a doubt, where the truest blessings are. I want to thank you if you've listened to this video or podcast, whatever platform you are on. I want you to share your story, if you will. I don't care where you're at. Remember, vulnerability is our greatest gift. And in that, you're not alone. Wherever you are in your journey, you are not alone. I ask you to hold tight, especially if you're in the abyss. If you are in the dark, you are not lost. You are in the design. You are being designed. If you have been through this, you've had your own experience, I ask you to share because they are all unique. I want to know. And while our paths are very unique and nobody will fully comprehend where we're at, that's also, I wanted to throw this in as I wrap up, the intimate design, because it's only the creator, between you and the creator, that has that true intimacy. And in that intimacy with the divine is also where the answers lay. And that nobody's going to fully comprehend where you are other than the divine. And as you create that relationship. But you and me, brother and sister, we're on this journey together. And we have promised one another to help each other. And if this has helped, that would be my biggest prayer. That's my biggest intention, my prayer to go out with this video. Again, I'm new to podcast, to Apple and Spotify, but I do believe if you resonated with this, if you could give it a review, if you could give it, I guess, a rating, please do so. This is how our tribe finds each other, through a resonance, through a frequency. Moreover, if you are on YouTube, I love you. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. And I want to give out a special thank you. And I don't know how this is going to intertwine to Facebook, but that's where this really all started. My OGs, before I even had a YouTube. I love you guys. That page has been, they are restricting me right now. And I notice they're not pushing out stuff. Side note, I think there's a book that's already been written. I just need to compile it. And it may take a couple years. But it's coming from my Facebook page primarily. I want to invite you guys to go join my Facebook community, but also to join the YouTube and these Apple or Spotify, whatever platform you listen to, so that we can connect on a regular basis. Because Facebook is going to be, I think, more of my porch, if you will. I'm going to, just because it's not being, stuff isn't being pushed out there very often. With all that being said, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to say I love you. Thank you for hanging in there. I will try to edit this so it's not so long. It ended up being an hour, but it came from my heart. And I wish I had somebody that had shared their experience and let me know I wasn't alone at that time. Hold tight if you're there. If you're wondering if you've fallen back asleep, you're just in design. You are amongst the design. I have so much love for you guys. And until next time, wishing you love and light. Namaste.